Hi, and welcome to SteamLUG Cast Season 4, Episode 8. We're recording this on the 15th of April, 2016. My name is Hero, and with me I have DerRidda.
Hi!
And we have played things in the past 2 weeks. What have you been playing, DerRidda?
I have been playing some Insurgency, a bit of Payday 2, and just have started playing Saints Row 2 and 3. How about you?
I've also been playing quite a bit of Payday 2, as well as, I was gifted Windward, which I hear it's similar to Sid Meier's Pirates, but I've never actually played that. It's pretty cool. Played that for way longer than I expected to after receiving it. Within the community, we've also had our past events, where on April 1st we played Daedalus No Escape, followed by Payday 2 on the 2nd. On the 8th, we played Team Fortress 2, and on the 9th, we played Coffin Dodgers. I know you were there for Payday 2, as well as like half the community.
Yeah, Payday 2 had a really nice turnout. I was later almost expected to not see that many people still, but no, we had like 4 crews going, at least.
Yeah, I think we always had 4 full crews for quite a while, and later there was a 5th one.
Yeah, so very happy with the turnout. That game has knit the community very closely together over the last couple of weeks.
And as we mentioned before, we don't even need the events for that because we're just always playing it.
At least one game is going per European evening and American evening.
Yeah, definitely. I was also there for the Daedalus event, which did not have as large of a turnout as our previous event for that game.
Obviously, it was April 1st. Everybody thought it was a joke.
Right, exactly. But it was still pretty fun. Mostly got destroyed by the AI, so what we expected. As for the other 2 events, I was away that weekend. In upcoming events, after this cast, we will have King Arthur's Gold, followed by tomorrow on April 16th, War Thunder, and then next week we will have Fistful of Frags on the 22nd and XCOM 2 on the 23rd.
In other community news, Cheese has released his little tiny game made with Godot called Tiny Chopper Raceway. It's a game where you race around a track with a chopper, a helicopter, and it's infuriatingly hard to control, but a little fun diversion.
And that's all open source. You can check it out on GitHub and see how it was done if you have any interest in how you can use the Godot engine.
I don't know, that would be a nice game to include with the demos Godot already has, if it's, well, self-documenting.
The included demos that come with the engine source, they teach one specific thing, but it's definitely something that could be shown off along with the engine.
And some demos aren't that specific, like the 3D platformer robot thingy, that's more also like a complete game.
Yeah, I guess. Moving on to Steam and Valve news. The Steam client received a new beta update that improves Vulkan performance, thanks to a better overlay.
That is nice. At least something Valve is still committed to and really behind.
I know that some people were saying that the Steam overlay in Vulkan was impacting performance in a very bad way, so this should make a pretty big difference.
Yeah, it seems like the early days when the Steam overlay first came out on Windows and everybody was disabling it because A, it caused games to crash, and B, it hampered the performance a lot.
Well, not so anymore.
The HTC Vive has launched, and we are still left out as Linux users.
Yeah, this is sort of expected that we would not get Linux support right away. I'm still ready to buy it as soon as there is support, but we do have confirmation that it does not work at the moment.
But we also have some Valve email confirmation that it's still being worked on.
Nice.
So, yeah, I guess we have that to look forward to.
I'm not worried about if it will be supported, but when. And as soon as it's ready, I'm purchasing it.
In the winter of 2666, you can finally Generation 1 Vive support on Linux.
I'm ready.
But after all, that will be the year of the Linux desktop, so...
Yes, according to my calculations. So, the GDC talk that Valve did about the Steam controller is now available with video and slides. It was pretty interesting. I watched the whole thing. They started out talking about how they iterated on the designs to come up with the controller. Originally, it was actually a giant trackball in the middle of the controller, which was kind of odd and awkward. But they found that that didn't work very well for anything besides a mouse, so that's where they went to the trackpads, and then with the trackpad you can't feel anything, so they added the linear actuators for haptics. So that was all cool. They also went over some tips for developers to make their games work a little better with the Steam controller, and stated their intentions that at some point in the future they may release an updated version of the Steam controller, which would have a new or improved look and feel, but the functionality would be largely the same, so as to not leave anyone behind.
Did they mention anything about robot assembly lines?
They did not, no. But you can go watch that video again if you want.
I just might. Moving on to tech news, Mesa seems to be progressing well on the OpenGL front as Radeon SI reaches OpenGL 4.2 compliance.
Yeah, this is obviously one of the biggest things holding back the open source drivers is OpenGL version compatibility, at least for a lot of newer modern games that are coming out. And it looks like some of the other drivers may be catching up to that soon, but for now, Radeon SI has GL 4.2, and that's exciting.
That is, we are basically at mech parity with that, because they still do not support anything newer than 4.2.
Right. Speaking of things that are further ahead than a Mac, Android, in the developer preview, has Vulkan support on select devices.
I believe the Tegra has also been updated, or at least the Shield devices by NVIDIA.
Oh, cool.
To include that new Vulkan support.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. But obviously this isn't that Linux gaming related, but it's nice to see the adoption.
Yeah, Vulkan on the most prolific end-user platform on the freaking planet is quite nice to see. It will be beneficial to us as well.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a new build of the Unity editor for Linux. You can download it from the usual forum threads, and it's, well, I forgot the version number, but it's fairly current and should have a lot of improvements over the old editor.
The exact version is 5.4.0 B13, which the 5.4 beta is the Unity engine version that upgraded. We've mentioned it before because it had a bunch of improvements for VR support, which I'm still not sure if those are available for actually testing on Linux, but you can at least develop games using that framework. So this is a pretty big update.
I should look into that again.
Also in engine news, the Godot engine has been updated to 2.0.2, which is continuing their trend of release early and release often. So it's mostly bug fixes and small feature improvements. They added the ability to press Z to toggle a wireframe in 3D view, which is matching the Blender key binding, if I remember correctly.
I would still recommend, though, for everybody who's serious about working with Godot to always build a daily from Git.
Yeah, me too. But
it's nice for the lazy slackers who just want to test it out.
Or those that want to pull it from Steam, which is easily the most convenient way, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in general gaming news, the Talos Principle has an updated beta with Vulkan improvements. I personally got double the frame rate compared to the previous Vulkan version with it, and I'm also ahead of OpenGL performance. Not by much, but far more stable with a much better minimum frame rate.
Yeah, that's really cool. I tried to get this to work and could not. I've only just recently installed the Vulkan compatible NVIDIA drivers, and every other Vulkan demo that I tried worked fine, but not the Talos Principle, so I will have to mess around with that a little bit later.
Yeah, it's in Talos Principle, when you change the renderer, within the options you get a blank screen. It's still working, at least it is for me, and you have to blindly press OK to make stuff work and then quit and start again to have the Vulkan renderer. Or you use the much more convenient command line flag to do it, which is posted somewhere in the forums. I can look into my Steam games.
Yeah, let's get that.
I'm using it.
When I tried, because I got that black screen, I then found the configuration file and manually changed the option, but I still had that black screen, so I'll try it again with this launch option.
Yeah, so use that if you're having problems.
The new Savage game, Savage Resurrection, has been announced. If any of you have played Savage 2 before, or Savage 1 even, or Han, Heroes of Newerth, you'll know that they have always supported Linux since a very long time ago and never really ceased. So it's expected that this will come out on Linux. The community also seems to think that this will be on Unreal Engine 4, which only supports that.
It's cool to see that, but a bit disappointing as well, because I believe S2 always used their own Ogre-based engine back in the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool to see these nice graphics and an engine that also supports Linux, but it's also kind of sad to see studios dropping their internal engines.
I think this was sleuthed off of somebody's, an employee's resume or portfolio or something like that. So it's not confirmed as far as I know. But in any case, Savage 2 has been sort of dead for a while. And I think Savage 1 still has some people that play it quite a lot, but a new fancy updated version will be nice to have. And for anyone who hasn't played it, Savage is in some ways similar to Natural Selection or Nuclear Dawn, where there's 2 commanders on each side, and then the individual units are people. So an RTS for some people, and then sort of an FPS for everybody else, though this is more focused on melee combat than shooting.
And here's another big announcement. In my opinion, Hand of Fate 2 has been announced, and it looks absolutely great.
Yeah, there's, as far as looks, you can see the graphical improvements. Not that the first one looked bad, but the little bit that I've seen already looks very nice.
And it's supposed to have some improvement to the depths of lots of more variety with the random encounters you have. You have companions. It seems like a good iterative sequel, and I'm already excited.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's a lot of depth that's been added. Just in general, the more complexity to it.
But the release date is early 2017, so don't hold your breath. You can't hold your breath that long.
But a much sooner date, Don't Starve Together is scheduled to leave early access on April 21st.
That is still in early access?
Yeah, so Don't Starve itself is not, but Don't Starve Together is, which is obviously the multiplayer. I think we'll be having an event for this next month. Enter the Gungeon has been released with day 1 Linux support. This is
a top-down 2D roguelike dungeon crawler twin-stick shooter, and I have no more text to add to this.
Exactly. It's a lot of things. I know a lot of people have been very excited about it.
Yeah, it seems to be one of these new streamer darlings that seem to pop up every now and then.
I think, to me, it seems like a lot of people who burnt out on things like Binding of Isaac, which has sort of that shooter and dungeon crawling, are now moving on to this.
Yeah, seems popular. So if you like Binding of Isaac, take a look at that. If you only like Binding of Isaac because of the bizarro nature of that game, this is probably not it.
Yeah, this one's not quite as dark, but it definitely has oddities.
And just released, we already mentioned it, Saints Row 2 and Saints Row the Third. The Linux versions have been released as was expected for quite some time, and they are also on sale right now, so if you want them, you can pick them up for really cheap. If you get Saints Row the Third, don't skimp out on that DLC bundle because it's like only $1 and a couple of cents more expensive than the regular version. So, Saints Row 2. Have you played it, Hero?
No, I don't have either of these.
You had them for a second, and then I had. So, Saints Row 2. A notoriously bad PC port on Windows already. Also isn't that great on Linux because it's, again, made by Virtual Programming, who wrap the Windows binaries for Linux, which has recently proven to be an okay method of porting games, but if you wrap up crap, you still have crap in a wrapper. So
yeah, it's a very faithful port, so I've heard.
Yeah, it has crashed for me a couple of times, killing some of my progress, but I just played a couple of hours, and that time it seemed to run fine. And it's also definitely the weakest entry of the Saints Row games in general, despite port quality on any platform, except for the first one, which is absolute dung and only exists on Xbox anyway. But yeah, it's fun. It still takes itself a bit seriously, which is a thing that Saints Row the Third definitely cured, and Saints Row the Third seems to be the pinnacle of the entire series, and it runs about as well as Saints Row 4 on Linux, because, again, wrapped up, but it's basically, the engine is almost the same as Saints Row 4. Everything is almost the same.
Nice.
So yeah, that runs quite well, and it starts off with the game no longer taking itself even a sliver of serious. So that's definitely the strong suit of that game. And yeah, Saints Row the Third definitely seems to be also a bit of a different beast than Saints Row 4, because suddenly you actually have to drive in that city, and then the whole game is a whole lot bigger if you can't constantly fly over the top of rooftops.
Yeah, Saints Row 4 is closer to a superhero game that took some ideas from the previous games rather than a goofy GTA clone.
Yeah.
At least from what I've seen.
But now we have a goofy GTA clone.
Hooray.
And yeah, that's the closest thing to actual GTA you will have on Linux. But you should play it for its own merits.
So, Linux was saying how the performance in Saints Row the Third was significantly better after running the auto configuration for the graphics and then turning on VSync. It made a huge difference for him. So, if you are experiencing issues, you may want to try turning on VSync and perhaps running that configuration.
Yeah, and if you are having performance issues with these VP ports in general, try knocking down options that are CPU intensive before you knock down any GPU intensive ones, because that is probably your bottleneck.
Speaking of bottlenecked games, Ark Survival of the Fittest has been released on Linux. This is basically the PvP mode. It's the mod that they use for the tournaments for Ark Survival Evolved, and this is free to play.
So, does this mean they have toned down or removed PvP in the regular game?
I don't think so.
So it's a bit more carefree. So they took the skunk bally
the bad part and made it worse.
part out of the original game and made it into its own game.
Yeah. But this is a lot more focused on defeating the other players rather than a long-term survival. And I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I do know this was originally created as a mod for their tournaments. It's cool that it's free to play. People were saying that the performance is almost exactly the same as the base game, so don't expect any magic just because it's probably a smaller area. Golf with Friends, an early access mini-golf game, has been ported to Linux. This thing has hugely positive reviews, so I don't really know a whole lot about it. It's not quite as goofy looking as, say, Vertiginous Golf. It doesn't have that sci-fi stuff, or steampunk in their case. But it's also no simulator. So, if that's what you're looking for, go check it out. We've previously mentioned the beta for speedrunners on Linux, but no, it is no longer required that you opt into the beta branch. In fact, that beta has been removed, and the Linux port is exactly in line with Windows on the main branch. So, thanks to Flibit, I think we'll be having an event for this game next month as well. Dark Horizons Mechanized Core is a mech game that I was looking into. It, to me, looks very similar to MechWarrior 3, which is, in my opinion, the pinnacle of the series. And for a while they've been saying that it should be coming to Linux soon, but recently they released a screenshot of the game running in Ubuntu.
Yeah, I know nothing about this game, but I can tell the developer is legit with his Linux commitment, because it's like a non-full screen screenshot on Ubuntu.
Wait, sorry.
And
that's not it. That's the other game. I messed this up. This is
Dark Horizons. Are we at Dark Horizons?
Yeah. Dark Horizons was not the screenshot. Dark Horizons was an announcement. So, anyway.
But it also has screenshots.
Yes.
And I meant to say what I said.
Okay, cool. But another interesting thing about this is they use Torque 3D for their engine, so they're contributing to open source with this. Oh, it is in Unity. Okay.
Yeah, and again, you can tell they are legit, because normally you see some Ubuntu UI screenshot with the Unity interface, and it's completely stock. Even all the icons in the launcher are stock, except for the programs that are currently running, these 3 stupid LibreOffice entries that are all there individually. Sometimes even the bloody stupid Amazon launcher. But this developer, he has his own background. He has changed the theme and changed the launcher. So he is using that crap. He is using it.
Yeah, and this has been a goal for a really long time for them, so that's why I've been following it so closely. I am very excited for this. Once it's released, I'll be playing that and tell people about it. Try to convince everyone, probably. But this is an early access, and should be available anytime soon. They say they can't give a date on when the release will be, but they want to release it soon so that Linux users can test it, was one of their main reasons. But also, this update includes some visual enhancements from the previous version they had available. But if that is not the type of mech game that you're interested in, perhaps Heavy Gear Assault is. Here's another game, which had an image released of the game running in Ubuntu. Not quite as customized, but it's a mech game of a different style. The mechs have wheels in their feet, so they move really quickly, and human-like stances instead of tank with legs.
Yeah, this is quite exciting. From basically no mech games to play to choose from in the not-too-distant future. I guess both schools of style for mech games, the American heavy mechs that should be shot down instantly, and then the Japanese mechs that cannot possibly ever work.
I guess we already had one mech game, which would be...
Which one is that?
Not quite a mech game. Strike Suit Zero. I mean, there you're in a ship that transforms into a mech in space.
Yeah, because having person-like properties in space is such an advantage. So, Homefront the Revolution has some new, mostly uninterrupted but blurred over gameplay video by IGN you can watch. It's around 30 minutes, and it looks quite nice. But I guess the much more important message here is that while the Linux port is not going to be released on day one, they have reaffirmed their commitment to bring it to Linux and also Mac, but who cares?
It's really cool because this would be the second game using CryEngine available on Linux. And this one, I would assume, would be much more complete, as the other one we have is Snow, and that still has some kinks.
So yeah, that is one of the games I am personally looking forward to quite a bit. It's very much reminds me of the newer Far Cry games like Far Cry 3, 4, and to some extent Primal.
Oh, definitely. It still has that legacy, despite no longer being developed by Crytek.
And none of the later Far Cry games were developed by Crytek.
Oh, okay. Well.
But yeah, it has this open world feel to it.
Yeah.
Where you liberate zones, do random encounters in the map, and think of it a bit like Shadow of Mordor with guns.
And co-op.
But probably not such a cool Nemesis system.
Yeah, open world, co-op, first-person shooter. That's a little bit more serious than, what's that game called? Borderlands fits into that description. But these are very different games, so if you want something a little bit more serious that's open world and co-op, then Homefront the Revolution.
One bad thing though is it has already a stupid pre-order scheme in place, because we can't have a AAA game without it.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are complaining about microtransactions, but I don't think it's a big deal. It's just accelerated unlocks.
So I guess this concludes this week's very quick and not that dirty and family-friendly cast.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Be sure to mention any feedback at our email, cast@steamlug.org.
IRC, we have a channel there, #SteamLUG on irc.freenode.net.
You can also tweet to us at SteamLUG.
Or Google Plus us on +SteamLUG.
And in case you weren't sure, on YouTube, you can listen to our casts and occasionally watch gameplay videos. Channel SteamLUG.
Thanks everybody for listening in, and see you next time.
Goodbye. Toggle waveform in 3D view, or waveform, wow. To me, looks very similar to Mech Assault 3, Mech Warrior 3, that's it. Mech Warrior 3